With a lot of the enlisted ranks in the Army, there's definitely some pros and cons, maybe some opportunities to get you out of some work, maybe some things that are put you more responsibility, so it gives you more work, all sorts of things. There's definitely some different pros and cons, and let's break some of them down. What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and I wanted to educate you on some of the pros and cons at the different levels of ranks, and some of them may transfer over to a lot of ranks, and maybe it may depend on the unit and some of your own experiences, but I want to give you some examples to be able to kind of provide you with, what to expect when you're kind of moving up through the ranks in the United States Army on the enlisted side, and what maybe some of those pros and cons could possibly be. Of course, if this is the type of, material you want to learn about to prepare you for the Army or whatever the case might be, just to entertain you, don't waste any time, hit that subscribe button because I'm not going to waste any of your time. We're going to move into it right now and let's talk about some pros and cons. Now, you kind of have to bundle up probably like E1 through E3, the privates. You have private, PV2 private, and then private first class. So the privates kind of pretty much have the same pros and cons. Starting off with, let's say, a con. You're brand new, so when there's things that suck, some shitty detail that has to get done, you're probably going to be the first choice that they're going to go do that. You kind of have to earn your keep, right? You have to kind of build your way up, prove yourself. If you're a private and you prove yourself pretty well, then sure, you might get less shitty details, but while you're still a brand new private kind of a thing, you're going to get stuck with probably a lot of shitty details. Now, a pro, you're a brand new soldier, right? So their expectations of you are probably kind of low. So if you mess up, they kind of understand to a certain point, right? I mean, sure, you might still get yelled at, and depending on how bad you messed up, it could still result in some kind of punishment type of thing. But to some extent, right, you have a little bit of leeway to play with. You don't do this right, you mess this up, or whatever the case is. They're like, well, he's new, he's got to learn. He's a private, she's a private, whatever the case is, right? You have a little bit of flexibility in there because they don't expect a whole lot out of you yet. So you kind of have that to work with in your advantage. Of course, cons, you're not making a whole lot of money. Privates don't make a whole lot. I mean, you don't really start making decent money, I feel like, until probably maybe like specialist, sergeant, somewhere around there. But your privates, they don't make a whole lot. So that's probably could be a con. But there is still a lot of benefits. So it depends on how you kind of outlook of it is, or how you kind of look at the whole big picture. From there, we'll move up and we'll go to specialist, which is the pay grade of an E4. You make a little bit more money kind of a thing. But some pros and cons with being a specialist. Well, pro, you probably don't get stuck with all those crappy details, right? You're probably not their first choice unless you're a screw up. If you're a screw up, then sure, you might still be their first choice because they're trying to make you better kind of a thing. But otherwise, you're probably not their first choice when the shitty details come about because that's going to the privates. So maybe a lower chance of you having shitty details. A con, well, they expect a little bit more out of you, right? You've had a little bit more experience in the Army, even if you came into the Army as a specialist because you have that college education kind of a thing, but they definitely expect a little bit more out of you. So your leeway for mess ups has definitely shrunken quite a bit. It's probably a big difference of how much slack they're willing to give you of mess ups compared to when you were a private. I mean, even kind of along with that, right? If the privates are kind of messing up, but you're around there, they kind of expect that you should have stopped them from doing that mess up, or you should have taught them better, or you should have mentored them. There's a lot of kind of things in there where if you're the specialist and the privates are messing up, then someone's probably gonna be like, why didn't you correct them? Why didn't you show them the correct way? You were there, right? So you sometimes kind of feel a little bit of wrath from higher ups if you're around the privates that are messing up. So you do have a little bit more responsibility to a certain degree. I mean, even in some cases, you might even be like a team leader. It really just depends on the kind of the unit and how short-staffed they might be kind of a thing, and how much, you might have to pick up the slack for maybe positions that aren't currently filled. A pro, well, you're part of the E4 Mafia, right? Sometimes, depending on how strong the E4 Mafia is at your unit, maybe it's, pretty awesome. Sometimes you may not even notice anything really, but you sometimes have a cool clique of other specialists that are looking after each other and helping you out kind of a thing. And then other locations, maybe the E4 Mafia isn't very strong and you don't really notice anything. So that just kind of depends maybe on the location. But hey, you at least will get to say you're a part of the E4 Mafia, which is kind of a fun thing to be a part of, I guess. A con is that before with the other ranks, it was pretty much automatic with promotions, right? You just had to be breathing, not screwing up, to extreme degree kind of a thing. I mean, you can make minor mistakes and you're still gonna get promoted. You're still gonna automatically, at a minimum, get promoted within a certain time frame. Well, now that once you've reached a specialist as an E4, your automatic promotions end right there. So kind of a con. You're gonna have to do a little bit more work now. If you wanna earn some more money, you wanna build up in rank, you're gonna have to do a little bit of work because now you have to go to the board, you have to earn points, and depending on your MOS, that might be a difficult thing, it might be really easy, it really just depends. And then you have to also attend a non-commissioned officer academy. Now, if you do go to the board and you go to that non-commissioned officer course, but you have points, well then you're gonna become a corporal, which is still an E4, but there's definitely some different pros and cons with being a corporal compared to being a specialist. A pro is that you might get a little bit more responsibility. You're probably gonna get even less of the shitty details kind of a thing because you're considered an NCO kind of a thing, I guess, sort of. You know, I mean, you are considered an NCO, but sometimes it just depends on the unit as far as if they really treat you like an NCO, which is actually kind of a con too, because you're kind of in that middle kind of gray area type of thing where you're not a specialist, but you're also not a sergeant, and some units may treat you like a non-commissioned officer still, and some places would be like, nah, he or she's a corporal, so we're gonna have them do this NCO thing that the other NCOs don't want to do. So that kind of may vary on the unit, but that can probably be a con too. All right, from there we'll move into E5, which is a sergeant, and some of the pros and cons that come with that. At this point, you probably shouldn't be really doing shitty details. You might end up being in a situation where you're in charge of the shitty detail, right? They need an NCO to look after these soldiers that are doing this crappy detail, but that may or may not necessarily mean that you have to do the work of it. I mean, you can have the privates be doing the work and you're really just there to supervise to make sure they do the work. Sometimes it still sucks being there, you know, depending on what the detail is, but you're probably not having to actually do the detail. You still have the kind of the con of, you know, promotions, right? Because if you want to go from an E5 to an E6, you want to move up to a staff sergeant, that still has kind of a lot of the same requirements. You have to go to the board, you have to make points, and you have to go to NCO Academy. So, you know, definitely still kind of the same con that you had with an E5, that it does take a little bit more work to get promoted. A pro of being an E5 is that you probably don't have a roommate in the barracks if you are a single soldier at this rank. Typically, you know, NCOs are supposed to have their own rooms. There might even be cases at lower ranks where you might have your own room because maybe there are not a lot of single soldiers in your unit or certain other circumstances. But let's say at this level with a full up unit to their full capacity, they're supposed to be kind of a thing, you know, you might probably have a situation where, you know, you are now an NCO, so you don't have a roommate. I mean, sometimes it still ends up being a case where maybe like there's a lot of single soldiers, so there's not enough rooms for the E5s to get their own rooms, but at this point you should have your own room. So that's pretty nice, you know, you don't have to worry about another roommate, you don't have to worry about, you know, if they're messy compared to you being a very clean person kind of a thing, you know, and them partying all night when you're trying to get some sleep, or maybe you wanted to party and they want to get some sleep, whatever. So you probably should at this point have your own room if you're a single soldier as an E5. Now, a con with this is that now you're a non-commissioned officer, so when your privates mess up, you're gonna probably feel a little bit of the wrath of it. You're gonna probably get a little bit of ass chewing. Hey, why did private so-and-so do this or do that kind of a thing? You know, you're gonna be a little bit responsible to a certain degree where you're gonna feel a little bit of the heat from that when your soldiers mess up. You also probably don't have really any leeway much anymore as far as, you know, if you mess up, kind of you make mistakes kind of a thing. You might have a little bit of an excuse of like, I'm a new sergeant kind of a excuse, but other than that, a lot of kind of things, if you kind of mess things up, it's gonna be a little bit more, you know, they're gonna be a little harder on you with the mess ups compared to the way it was in lower ranks. But let's transition from a sergeant from an E5 up to a staff sergeant, E6. This one at this level, you probably shouldn't have any shitty details. I would not imagine it's a very big percentage. It'd be probably a really small percentage chance of you having shitty details now at this point as an E6 as a staff sergeant. So that's pretty good. Con, well, you probably don't have any more leeway anymore. You no longer use the excuse of like, I'm a new sergeant kind of a thing. So you make mistakes, you don't really have much of an excuse anymore. From there, let's go up to the next one, E7, a sergeant first class. At this point, you're probably a platoon sergeant. So a good pro is you probably could just kind of do whatever you want for physical fitness in the morning. You might have some circumstances where like the lower ranks, you know, in certain units might have allowed you to do that too. But at this level, if you're, let's say, in a platoon sergeant role, if you want to send the platoon to go out and do PT as a squad or whatever, or designate someone to go lead the platoon and you want to go do PT on your own, you easily could probably get away with that. You might not have had that luxury, you know, with the lower ranks, maybe depending on the unit you might have, but now maybe Army-wide kind of a thing, you have a much higher chance of being able to do something like that. Like if you want to do physical fitness on your own, you probably can do that if you want to. A con, definitely more responsibility, definitely no room for mistakes, but it's kind of the same con like you already had with an E6 anyways. But hey, a good pro for being a sergeant first class as an E7 is if you are a single soldier at this rank, you won't live in the barracks, as E7s don't live in the barracks. I mean, sometimes even E6s don't. It really just depends on how full the barracks are, but definitely at this level now at E7, if you are single, you won't live in the barracks. So even though you're single, you'll still receive BAH and BAS, so you'll have that extra pay to be able to afford an apartment, or if you want to get on-post housing and it's available, you can choose to do so. So you're out of the barracks, don't have to try to get married to get out of the barracks. You can rank up and get out of the barracks if you want. Now, moving into the other ranks, you have your E8 and your E9 kind of a thing. You have your first sergeant, your sergeant major, all that kind of thing. Their pros and cons are kind of, I don't know, they kind of start to get a little bit smaller with what the pros and cons are, depending on kind of what your goals, I guess, are in the Army. Because at this point, you're not doing any shitty details, so I guess that's a pro for sure, kind of a thing. You do have more responsibility, and probably at this point, maybe that's a pro for you because you want that responsibility, and now you're educated enough to be able to look after, the job you're supposed to do, kind of a thing. So the pros and cons really kind of depend on the person maybe at this point at the higher ranks, and it's a little bit easier to kind of outline pros and cons at some of the ranks before that. But my viewers out there, I want to know, what do you think is kind of like the happy medium, the golden kind of area of rank, the best rank to be at that's got the most pros and cons, good balance? A lot of people are probably going to say like E4, E5. That's kind of what I would feel like is E4, E5 kind of area is usually kind of the common grounds of what you're kind of looking for, and it kind of has a good balance of pros and cons. So that's a pretty good area for me, but I'd like to hear from you guys down below. If you don't really know anything about rank as far as how the structure kind of goes, I'm gonna take it back old school to one of my really old videos when this channel was starting to just do well kind of a thing. I got this video right here that explains enlisted rank, but go easy on me on criticism. At that time, I think I had like 200 subscribers. I figure that video might at best do 20 views kind of a thing. So there are probably some mistakes in there that, go a little easy on me. But check out links down in the description box. Hit that thumbs up. I'm Christopher Chaos. Thanks for watching. See you next time. See ya.